Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Unfucking Your CX. I am Zack Hamilton, your host. But what I'm really excited about today is the guest that we have in the hot seat. Many of you may have seen his work, but if you haven't, Ken Hughes, an amazing, not just expert in customer experience, but also kind of the behavioral psychology of customers. So, Ken, welcome to the hot seat.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Yeah, so I'm really curious. Can I like to ask all the guests, before we get started on that one topic that really makes you cringe, kind of set the scene for us. Where do you typically have some of those conversations, maybe with a trusted colleague, where maybe you want to vent or you're looking, for maybe a mentorship around, hey, I have this one problem, I can't seem to solve it. Does that typically take place in a restaurant, maybe a coffee shop? Do you like to have it over a beer in your favorite pub? Maybe over a walk?
Definitely the walk. Actually, anyone who works for me in my organization, if they want my time, they have to come on a forest walk. I'm a big believer in space. I think one of the problems in corporate ideation is that we try and have these ideas at our desks, in meeting rooms that we already know, in environments we already know, with people we already know. And really, that's not the way creativity or ideas work. You need to give them time, space. You need to let stuff settle. You need to be in environments that might stimulate some form of different thinking. And so, for me, if you want to actually have a discussion with someone, you're probably better off leaving the environments you both know, going for a wander, and letting whatever comes come. And so really like a distillation kind of conversation is where my favorite conversations happen. So yeah, usually wandering around the woods. And if one of you only comes back, so be it. Best negotiation territory ever.
I love that. I was just thinking about kind of our conversation before we started the podcast, and I was just thinking kind of through the pandemic, and even as everything went remote, there came that point in time where, of course, we all spent so much time on our screens. And so all of my one-to-ones with my team were during walks. So I lived in this incredible neighborhood. We could go on a walk. And ultimately, to your point, it was that time of let's all walk away from our screens. If there's something that we need to review, like a PowerPoint or something, you got to send it a day ahead. Give us those times to review it. But then let's just take that walk to really debrief it, discuss it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually trying to start a social movement called Screen Free Sunday. I did it with a few friends, colleagues, and my teenage kids about what 2 years ago. But 2 months ago, we started it regularly. We did it, I think, about 2 or 3 years ago as kind of a novelty. And then I'm trying to bed it into routine now, where once a month you turn off your alarm on your phone in the morning, and the next time you pick up your phone will be to set the next alarm for Monday morning. So you give yourselves an entire day of no internet, no Alexa, Siri, no screens, no Netflix, nothing, no laptops. It's amazing, even with one day, how much you'll start to feel the withdrawal symptoms, but also within about halfway through the day, you'll start to feel a power that you had forgotten you had about creativity and about discovery. And when you extend it into your network, into your friends, your family, and other people enjoy it, you can start to see actually one of the issues in society that we're losing so much time on device that isn't productive. And that's everybody from CEO level all the way down. And so, yeah, I have a lot of creativity innovation work as well that I do with leaders. And what I always say is that unless you're giving yourself space and time and digital detox, you're not really doing yourself justice as a leader, because your job as a leader is to strategize, is to think, is to muse, is to be curious. And you can't be curious without space. If you remember your childhood, we were all pushed outside. And this is one of the saddest things about the modern childhood, the lack of outdoor. And we were pushed out the door, and you sat there on the curb with your mate, and you ended up doing something. Now, sometimes it was awful devilment, but that was also good. Mischief and play, that's how we discover, it's how we explore. And we got into all sorts of trouble. But into that came the building of forts and going off cycling on your bike and that Stranger Things kind of childhood that you can look at. And without that curiosity, without that space, without that sense of discovery, you're never going to get to be a creative, innovative person. And so I would have a concern for the entire Gen Alpha and Gen Z, the younger Gen Z generation, around curiosity and creativity and their ability to problem solve and their ability to give themselves time and space to discover. But anyway, that's not the subject of the podcast at all.
No, that's really interesting. Count me in for that, because one, we try to, as a family on Friday nights, put our phones away and we have game night. And so our kids get to pick, the card game, board game, whatever it is. And that's the time that we try and connect. But just to your point about kind of growing up, my mom's rule was, hey, when the street light comes on, that's when you need to come home, clean up, and let's have dinner. And I am one of six, and I grew up on a farm, but I had all my family over for Easter, and we hosted, and we were just kind of reliving kind of our moments that you were just talking about, our livelihood, our childhood. And I was explaining that, hey, I have an app now where I can track my kids. I know exactly where they are. I can open up an app and I can see it. And I shared, if my mom had that same app where she could discover me, she would have found me and friends riding our bikes probably 8, 9, 10 miles away,
Yeah.
discovering old abandoned barns in the woods, like with no care in the world. And I don't know if that would have been a good thing because I probably would have been in trouble. But to your point, it's all about that. And I think this really ties to customer experience, which is that level of creativity and problem solving capabilities and being able to go beyond just what's in front of us and what's on our screens and kind of what the norm is to how can we do this a little bit different?
Yeah, and it'll plug straight into the question about unfucking your CX. And one of the issues I feel in CX is the over reliance on transactional data. That expression, data is the new oil. Oil is no use to you. Crude oil, unless it's refined into gasoline or jet fuel, is useless. And so is a data lake. It's just data. And so one of my problems with CX is people build dashboards and get fascinated with NPS and transactional data. And they never really use that data to then make a difference in someone's life, which is what the whole point of CX is about. It's emotionally connection. It's about building loyalty, building customer lifetime value, all those things that we seek. And so for that, so our conversation neatly leads into that because, unless you're building a generation who can discover and who can have their creative and ideation and innovation engines fueled, we're going to be in trouble. So, I mean, in terms of recruitment, for instance, some people often ask me, if you're recruiting for the ideal CX executive or strategy director, who could they be? And sometimes you think, oh, well, you go down the data scientist route and you have people who are amazing at data and they're really useful people in your CX team. But really what you need in CX is emotional intelligence. That to me is the actual core part of CX. You need someone who has emotional intelligence, who understands how people work, which is where the behavioral science part of my work brings me, and understanding humans and human nature. And then you can use the data, of course, to connect those things and say, well, how can we use that data then to make someone feel special? How can we make our customers feel seen, heard, and valued? How can we deepen the relationship to the point where we've pushed past transactional loyalty? So the problem with NPS systems is that they all focus on transactional loyalty. You bought the product last month. In fact, you've bought the product every week for the last 2 years. That makes you a loyal customer. No, it just makes me a convenience customer. It makes me a transactional customer. Buy 9 cups of coffee, get a 10th coffee free doesn't make me a loyal customer to your coffee shop. It means I walk by your coffee shop every day. It's convenient to my walk to work, but that doesn't make me loyal. What makes me loyal is some kind of emotional connection. And so when you start to use data in a way that makes people feel something, then you're in that space. Let me tell you a great story about Octopus Energy. They're a UK sustainability-based utility company. So they're selling a commodity product, gas, electricity, same as everybody else. How do you differentiate that? Well, they went after CX and they thought, well, let's be a really CX core philosophy company. And in the pandemic, they had a huge inbound call problem, as everybody did, banks, insurance companies, everyone calling, trying to minimize bills. They weren't working, but they couldn't also ramp up their staff to match those higher inbound calls because they had staffing issues. People were working from home for the first time and they're having to pivot their whole call center model. And so they had an issue with, as a CX company, they were having longer and longer call waiting times. And no one likes that. No one likes to be on hold for 10 minutes. And they didn't like that. They thought, well, we can't increase the staff and we can't reduce the inbound calls. All we can do is make people feel better while they wait. What could we do? And they had a little session. And one of the executives had read an article a few months previously about nostalgia. And apparently he had read that the most powerful music you can ever hear is the summer hit when you were aged 14. So that long, hot summer when you were age 14, as we just spoke about cycling the bikes, and that long, hot, forgotten summer, hormones racing, cigarettes behind the bike shed, that whole thing. There's a song that was the hit that summer that if you hear it, even today on the radio, you'll get the warm and the fuzzies throughout the body. And with that information, they installed this very simple if-then data routing system where when you called in, they harvested the phone number, matched it to the account immediately, which is normal in customer contact. But then they went one step further and with the account number, they pulled your date of birth. And from the jukebox of 60 songs, you got the summer hit when you were 14 as you were on hold. What was fascinating is a lot of people, when they were interrupted with the agent, finally would say, no, I was listening to that. And so with a very simple piece of data, i.e. your date of birth, they personalized the experience. They made it about you, not about them. Because every other utility company plays you the boring music or the campaign ad that they're running at the moment or an upsell message, hey, Ken, why don't you buy more? And these organization made it about you. They made it about making you feel good. And that's the power of customer experience. Connect the
That's
data to making someone feel good.
Yeah, I love that example. I just wrote down browse the music when I was 14 years old. I'm curious what that is.
Everybody listening will do the first thing. In fact, most people listening to this have paused the podcast and gone off and entered into ChatGPT. What was the summary?
But I think that's so true when you think about kind of that power of emotional and that emotional connection, right? It reminds me kind of this luxury brand. I've told this story a couple times, but I was working with the CEO and she said, "Hey, look, when she think of this as like a luxury department store, boutique store," and she said, when our customers leave, we want her to feel, empowered and bold and confident, regardless if she purchases a blouse or a bag or a pair of shoes. And so I immediately just kind of shifted the conversation to, well, let's take a look at your employee data, your employee feedback. What are the top emotions coming from your employee? And she said, why? And I said, well, as a human being, we can't give what we don't have. So as an employee, if I don't feel empowered and bold and confident in the ways that I can show up and serve my customer, I can't give that emotion out. And she said that, she had never thought about that before. And then we were able to really start to connect the dots between less about the vanity metrics, but more about, leveraging the language models to understand, okay, the emotions behind each comment. And when the employee felt, and we could see it in employee feedback, bold, confident, and empowered, you can actually see it in the customer feedback. And then to your point, from a financial perspective, what we started to see was the number of shopping visits increased year over year. The average order value increased. So customer lifetime value was increasing, all by really looking at, from a leadership perspective, how do we show up and what is the emotion that we translate to our employees who.
Yeah, I would fully agree with that. Like, I mean, if we're to unfuck this issue, if the connection is the first thing, using data to make people feel good, to me the second thing would very much be employee first. So I was sharing a stage recently with Danny Mayer, the founder of Shake Shack, and we were chatting about customer experience and employee experience, and he had a wonderful quote, so simple: your employee is your first customer. That's it. Your employee is your first customer. They're the ones that the customer experience has to focus on first. Actually, to your point, how can you give what you don't have yourself? And I'm sure you featured the Ritz-Carlton on the podcast a few times in that space. I love the story that ethos the Ritz-Carlton have around that $2,000 budget that they all have on the front line to spend on any given pain point that the customer comes across, because they understand that, that's the role of the employee. The employee is an empowered individual who at any given time, without any management supervision or acknowledgement, can spend that budget on a guest experience to fix an issue. There's a wonderful story of a gentleman who checks out around 6:30 a.m. on the way to Miami to a really important business meeting. An hour or two later, he's on the plane, takes out his laptop to do some work, realizes he doesn't have his laptop. And he thinks, oh God. And he realizes I've probably left it in the hotel. Anxious hour or two on the plane, he eventually lands, immediately calls the hotel front desk. They check with housekeeping, and the room hasn't even been turned yet. Housekeeper walks in, there it is on the desk, and he needs it for a presentation later on that day. So he's really anxious, and it goes to guest relations. And usually what would happen there, with guest relations would take it and they would DHL it, and a day or two later he'd have it. But actually that housekeeper who went in had been recently off that empowerment training course, and she took her apron off, put the laptop in her bag, got into a taxi, used the $2,000 that she has to delight a customer, went straight to the airport, boarded a plane to Miami, and 2 or 3 hours later knocked on the hotel door and handed him the laptop straight away. Now, did she get fired for doing that? No. Were there a few problems with cleaning rooms that day because someone dropped out of the schedule? I guess so. But the whole ethos around the Ritz-Carlton is you see a problem, you fix it. And that can only work when employees are truly empowered to make a difference. And those stories are throughout the Ritz-Carlton, because every single individual who has gone through that training process and is told and is educated to know that you are the one that makes the difference, not the assets, not the physical assets, not the chandelier, not the look and feel of the hotel. It's you as an individual that gives that experience to the guest. So yeah, absolutely employee first. And the third thing I suppose I would say, if we're using data to make people feel better, if we're using our employees to really, to dial up the experience for the customer, the third thing is actually stepping away from the word customer experience. So with my brands I work with all over the world, I have stopped using CX as a word, and I've started educating them and encouraging them to use customer intimacy as opposed to customer experience. And if you think about a relationship, let's take a romantic relationship. You can have a one-night stand, and that could be an experience, an individual experience, and it could be great. And you could have a one-night stand every night for 6 months, and eventually it kind of runs a bit empty, doesn't it? It's shallow. So experiences on their own can be amazing things. They can be things that will drive a peer-to-peer conversation. That's fantastic. But it's intimacy that we crave in relationship. And intimacy is defined as fostering a sense of closeness, so that there's depth in. You can have scaled experience, but you can't have depth necessarily. Intimacy is where you move to for that. And so in intimate moments, what we're looking for is moments where we can connect with a customer that goes beyond transaction, of course. And the deeper you go, so let me tell you a really simple story with United Airlines. There was a guy called Kerry Drake. He was living in San Francisco. He got that call that we'll all get at some point. Maybe some of your listeners have had it before, where you get the call, his mother was on her deathbed. She had been ill for a while. And he got that call, get back now. It could be tonight. So he jumps on United's website, gets a flight from San Francisco through Houston to Lubbock, where she lives in Texas. His connection for his second plane is only about 45 minutes in Houston, really tight. So he's on the apron on the first plane in San Francisco that evening, and the pilot comes on and says, "Look, I'm sorry, we've got some issues. We're going to be 45 minutes late getting out." And he realizes immediately, there goes his connection. So there goes his moment that Hollywood kind of feeds you, that you deserve, at the bedside of your dying parent. And understandably, he starts crying on the plane. And the air steward brings him a few napkins to dry his tears. She sees him upset. And she gets the story from him and she thinks, oh my God, that sucks. And so she's chatting to the captain a few minutes later and he also thinks, oh my God, that does suck. And so in aviation, obviously, we all know that planes in the sky make money, planes on the ground don't. And so pilots and crew are bonused on keeping that plane up and getting it out in time and all that. And so they know that doing the right thing here probably is better than the profit thing. And this is where CX is really interesting, because actually sometimes when we're driven by revenue and profit, we actually need to peel away from what feels right sometimes. And the first pilot radioed into Houston and got talking to the second pilot of the next plane. And between them, off-piste, they colluded to delay the second plane for no reason. And so that first plane, when it did take off, made up a little bit of time in the air. And when it touched down, Mr. Drake came off, ran through the airport like a crazy man, like we've all done, bags flying, trying to get to the next gate. Came around the corner to meet the second pilot, who was standing on the ramp, not in the plane, standing on the ramp, and put his hand and said, look, Mr. Drake, stop running. This plane goes nowhere without you on board. And he got on board, he made the flight, he made the moment to his mum's, and he did get to say his goodbye. Now ask yourself the question, who will Mr. Drake fly with for the rest of his life? That's how intimacy is born. Loyalty, true emotional loyalty, true brand connection is born in moments where brands lean into intimacy and they foster a sense of closeness, and they listen to the customer and they see what the customer needs, and they don't listen to terms and conditions and payment plans and this is the way it is. They genuinely see a customer's issue and they fix it. And that, to me, when I tell that story, no one is moved by that story, because everyone thinks, yeah, well, how can we do that to everybody? But the point about AI is we're about to have a technology that allows us not only scale of connection, but also depth. So we can use the data and we can know exactly what's happening in the customer's life at every touch point. And then we can deliver personalized messaging to them in a way that really feels like it's a genuine person. It could be even a deep fake from a customer experience point of view, but we're going to get to the point now where we have depth and scale. And as a customer experience executive, if you're not really up to speed on how you're going to utilize that, then you're significantly behind where you need to be. So we're about to crack that depth and scale issue, because we always have to sacrifice one for the other over time. And the next 3 years, our conversation today will be so different, because we're going to be at a place where, again, back to the creativity piece that we opened up with, that Octopus Energy example, it took a creative ideation to say, hey, what if we use their date of birth to play them an amazing song from when they were 14? Only a human, of course, can have that thought. That's not going to come from AI. But we're going to have to look at all the data we have, all the technology we have, put those two things together, and then layer a whole creative piece on top. Well, okay, we've got all these resources now. How can we make people feel special? Ultimately, it comes down to, I have a CX tagline: connection is everything. That's it, 3 words. Connection is everything. Making customers feel connected to your brand, connected to purpose, connected to the why. That's how you build emotional loyalty. It's certainly not buy 9 cups of coffee, get a 10th coffee free.
Absolutely. And I think that's such an incredible moment there where we can end that. Ken, this has been absolutely amazing. For our listeners who want to learn more about you, maybe even get in touch with you to see the different type of work that you do with brands, how can they get in touch with you?
KenHughes.com will find me. Ken Hughes on YouTube is my YouTube channel. I have a newsletter that comes out once a month, which again has about a 10-minute piece I'm using every month. And you'll find me on keynote stages all over the world. So mainly what I do is I'm a professional motivational speaker, and I speak in the US, the Middle East, Europe, a little bit in Africa and Asia. And that's where you'll see me on stage performing. If you want me to come to your organization, happy out. I'm happiest when I'm inspiring people around customer experience and how they can better connect with their customers.
Very cool. Well, Ken, thank you for coming to the hot seat. This was absolutely incredible. And we hope we can have you back soon. Maybe next time I'll be in a forest with you.
Look forward to it, Zach.
Cheers.